Welcome to Soul Night Live, episode number 115. Today, our guest is Steve Howe. Welcome to Soul Night Live, episode number 115. Today, our guest is Steve Howe, and we'll be discussing the two new albums that he's part of right now. So, Steve, welcome. So good to have you here today.
Well, thank you.
So, I thought we'd get started and discuss the new Yes album first. I believe it's the 23rd Yes studio album. Is that right?
I'm not counting.
Well, I love it. You know, Yes is a band that just keeps giving, and you have such a vast discography, so there's just so much to dig into and enjoy, and
Yeah, there is. There
thank
is.
you so much for yet another installment. It's always a treat to get to listen to a new Yes album, and to have another one, it was great to dig into this one, and I'm
Well,
really excited about it. I really like it.
mhm.
I felt like this one was kind of coming from a different headspace than the Quest. Would you agree with that?
I guess we found a nice pattern in the Quest. It's quite an experimental thing with me producing, and not that I haven't always had part of the production role in Yes and other bands I've been in, but this was a little different. I think, Yes possibly benefited from an experienced overview, which I was kind of able to give. But in the most part, it was just really a practical thing. And, I did have a practical solution to how to make albums, for Yes. And I kind of dreamed it up and it kind of worked. So the Quest was one thing. But then to slip into doing the next album was kind of sneaky and beautiful, because in fact we didn't sort of down tool and then retool. We were sort of like flowing from the edge of the release of the Quest into this second album. So it was kept us occupied and off the streets and out of the bars and all that stuff, and squandering money in casinos and things like that. But basically, we found something to do, and that was a follow on from the Quest in the same atmosphere, under the same conditions. But they're slightly improved because John Davison came and he's now living most of the time in the UK. Jeff did all of his keyboards on this album at headquarters studio with Curtis Schwartz and myself, and not at his own place. But that was just how it all came about. It was better to work, hands on when we could. And of course, Billy and Jay, they did their stuff remotely, but that didn't diminish anything they gave us, because they gave us some great stuff. And Billy, in particular, designed, if you like, how the bass and drums would be as Yes-ish as possible, like he did on the Quest. But this was another opportunity to show that he could take what we'd done and add a whole level to it that we didn't, not all of us were thinking about very much, but he added to the arrangements and the punctuations and the accents and the sort of like stopping and starting factor that a bass and drums can do. And he designed a lot of that, and it's to his credit. But there again, there was a lot of, all the other textures had to come along and come to life too. So it's been very exciting.
Yeah, well, the buzz on the streets so far has been very positive, and people are pretty excited by the first two tracks that you've released. And yeah, Billy's, really evoking the classic Yes bass sound on this one. It's the word I think of when I think of Yes bass is propulsive, and there's a lot of that on this record. This one seems a little more upbeat than the Quest. Would you say that just the conditions of the world at the time affected the tone of the Quest versus this new record, or no?
Well, undoubtedly in some way, but not in a way that I could possibly be sure to describe. But I guess, it was a difficult time for everybody. We had to find our feet in another environment, if you like. But for us, and it was fortunate I upgraded my own private studio in 2019 when I had a outburst and wrote six titles from collected ideas that I'd been not been able to get back to, but because of the time that we gave ourselves, which was the second half of 2019, after touring all the way through the first 6 months, we then had the second 6 months off to write, and then the deal came along with Thomas Weber at Inside Out Sony, and basically it couldn't have come at a better time. And he's always been very supportive, Thomas, of Yes, and he's been a great. He's the most honest person I know. He says right from the gut and the heart and the mind. He says, "This is what I think," and so he's a very useful member of the team.
Excellent. Well, it comes out in about 2 weeks, so I thought we would kind of go track by track and talk a bit about each song that's on there and how it came together. Talk about the guitars you use. Being a guitar player, I'm definitely interested in that angle. And
Sure.
I thought we'd talk a bit about the album cover first in the title.
Yeah.
It's another
Why not?
beautiful Roger Dean. Yeah, night
Yeah.
sky kind of setting. Am I right? It's kind of like there's a lake and the sky is reflecting in it.
That's more or less the gist of it. Yeah. I don't want, I mean, I don't take any credit for this at all, but the basic germ of the idea did start with me. Roger at first said, I don't know, that's something artists have been trying to paint for years. It's one of the most difficult things to paint the sky with a lake, with the moon and the stars reflecting in it. And first of all, he backed away and said, "Hope he doesn't mind me telling you this, or telling the whole world this." But he kind of backed off it for me. Said that's like that. But then somehow the idea haunted him for a bit, and then we chose "Mirror to the Sky" as the title track. So he got down, and yeah, this is really a very different. I mean, it's Roger Dean without any doubt at all, but it's like almost kind of rethought of for this particular album, and I think it has a good relation to the music, like Roger's work does. He heard a lot of this music as it was being created, because our headquarters studio near Haywards Heath isn't far from Brighton, where, well, Howe, or no, not Howe, he lives somewhere near Brighton. I've forgotten what it is right now, which part of the local scene, but he was close enough to come up to the studio, so he was a visitor sometimes. So yeah, Roger's work has always been astounding, and he never fails to come up with something really fresh for us, and this is great. And of course, Doug and Glenn Gottlieb, who have been doing Yes programs for years and are the photographers generally for Yes, do the layout. But Curtis Schwartz, who's our engineer, has got some great cameras, like a Leica and his iPhone, and he took these kind of more intimate pictures. And I particularly love this one. If you can see this one where I'm holding a knife and we're in the kitchen.
Yeah,
It,
is it
yeah,
somebody's
I mean,
birthday?
it just shows that, I mean, basically, I think I said this to somebody the other day, that I only want to be in things that are real, and a group that's real can cope with all the levels of imbalance that come at us, and we're still stable. And I think that's what we've done. What I've tried to do from production is to give that stability, but also to take the time. But if you want to kick off with some songs, I mean, I don't know if I can say much about every song. I mean,
Well, it's okay.
it's quite hot off the presses for me.
Sure.
But yeah, on Cut from the Stars, that's the most different track guitaristically from the rest of the album, really, because on that I play Stratocaster, but I use an analog pedal board. So it's got this cool multi-pedal on it that a lot of people missed and didn't realize how fab it was. Double wah wah is it, auto double wah. And
Oh,
so it's got a lot of different settings, and on that I use an analog board with an amp, and so it's very undigi, if you like, in the guitar domain, but a Stratocaster, admittedly. And this song was written by John and Billy, and I kind of got round to grips with when the other guys have written the song. I've got sort of an open book, like, what's the guitar going to do? And I don't ponder that very much. I get a guitar and I get some knowledge of the music, and then I sit and play some things, and just find out where, how I can fit in to their plot and become part of it. So, but the next story is quite different, because All Connected is a bigger track. It's got some grandiose levels. We move between textures that are definitely rock textures, but they're put in a different sort of order of events. So
yeah.
you get the sort of slidey steel guitar, which I'm now playing, and almost sometimes I look back and don't remember it's a steel, because it's become so much of my sound. So it opens with steel theme, and we get this song that has all sorts of interesting, quite different guitar approach from me, because Billy wrote some of the parts that I then replayed with my own sounds.
Mhm.
And basically that gave me a head start on the track, because he'd already sort of set about some of the moments that I would recreate. So it's a very joyful sort of song. It's kind of celebrating the fact that you just can't get away from being connected, to the universe, and also through everybody else. Well,
Yeah.
what follows is a highly developed piece of music, is Luminosity, because this piece, this took some thinking about, because we had like version A, and then somehow we kind of felt, well, maybe we need a version B. So this came about, and one of the featured things I do on here is play auto harp,
I
which I do.
heard it. Yeah.
It's on Turn of the Century. It's on quite a few Yes
It
tracks, and
made
I
me think of that tune Countryside.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
Lost in the Countryside.
Lost in, yeah, auto harp. So I dabble with that, but more importantly, this is a collaboration with the three of us, Billy and John and myself. We kind of got this piece sort of like nailed down with different ingredients, and they are very different. You know, the song "Luminous" is wonderful, and yet we call it Luminosity because we kind of expanded this idea into a bigger tune. Once again, I move on to steel at the end when the orchestra come back in and start doing a little bit of their orchestration work, which is really about the first time it appears on the ends of a couple of songs like All Connected and Luminosity, but just to accompany us in I wouldn't say in the background, but they're not dominating us. You know, we are holding the fort.
Yeah,
So
I have if I
go
could
ahead,
interject,
jump in, jump
quick
in.
question. You played the steel since I believe close to the edge. I was wondering, prior to that, did you ever play with it on your finger in the traditional sense and then thought, I'd want something fatter, so you got the steel instead?
Well, I was dabbling with bits of steel, and I did try the bottleneck, but I was always very uncomfortable with that. So I guess the first guitar I bought in America when I first went on the very first tour in 1971 was a Gibson steel guitar, and I desperately wanted this. And it does appear on "And You and I." That was really one of my first Yes things. I had played a little bit earlier, and I'm not sure what the hell it was on what track. But anyway, we'll move along from there. So it interested me more and more. Got the pedal steel as well from Showbud, so I had some pedal steel ideas that I wanted to fulfill. But it took a long, slow process of it being until going for the one. So when that track opens and it's just the steel all the way through without any guitar, then I suddenly thought, well, I've got there. You know, if I can do that, I can get there. So actually, fun enough, later on when I released my album Motif Volume 1 on my own label, it's a collection of solo guitar pieces. There's actually a solo dobro piece on there called Devon Blue, which I wrote. So I was really, over the years, just getting so confident on steel. And there's some amazing things about playing a steel if you play it for long enough.
Sure.
You come up to notes, and if I used to sit with the tuner quite a lot, visual tuner, so I could see if I was going to hold a note for say 2 bars or something, I wanted to know it was in pitch. But gradually my ear has guided my hands, and pitching isn't so difficult. But it's one of the arts you've got to perfect, but also what's possible within the tuning. I think I've gone off the point too much there, but somewhere in there was part of your answer.
Oh,
Part of
yeah.
the answer
When
you
did
wanted.
you acquire the Fender that we've seen you use for so many years?
Well, yeah, you see the Gibson, which is on the early ones. Yeah, what I did was in the 70s, I thought I was going to open a guitar shop. So I had a good working relationship with George Gruen down in Nashville. He
Sure.
owned
Yeah.
one of the top guitar shops. And I
Amazing
had
place.
masses of, I mean, I'd buy 20 guitars at once. I went in there because I was going to open a store. Well, what I found was, oh, hold on, they won't let me open the store. So what am I going to do with these guitars? But that steel I bought particularly because Santo and Johnny, he was always playing a Fender. And when I got the Fender, that was it. I hardly ever played a Gibson again. I did on a solo album called Portraits of Bob Dylan. I used a really early Charlie Christian pickup double neck Gibson guitar with the necks separate. They weren't filled in between the necks. So I did use some Gibsons later, but the Fender was what I was looking for. A bit like when I found the Gibson sound was fundamentally my sound until Relayer, and I went Telecaster crazy, which I have gone on Mirror to the Sky. We'll come on to that in a second.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
basically,
definitely.
that side of my work is really interesting.
Well, I love it. You're one of my favorite steel players, and I like it because you don't have the typical blues cliches that people seem to gravitate towards when they pick up a slide. You kind of remind me more of someone like George Harrison that just plays beautiful melodies with it.
Yeah, I'm interested in that, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Next up, "Living Out Their Dream." This is another peppy little number, kind of the shortest
Yeah.
one on the album, And kind of an interesting arrangement. It starts out with something really upbeat, and then you break into this kind of dominant seventh bluesy ending out of nowhere, which is kind of a surprise.
Well, that is meant to surprise you because you've had a sort of chaotic rock song with some very kind of traditional, yes, I even think it sounds a bit like the Rolling Stones at the beginning,
Oh yeah, the little yeah, that's almost like Keith Richard chords. Yeah,
those particular movements are quite Stone-esque. But when you get to that interesting ending, now that does kind of tell the story because it ends with the line, there's no time for a happy ending. So that's sort of like sounds pessimistic, but it's slightly tongue in cheek because the whole thing is fairly tongue in cheek. Now, everything that's written that I wrote in that song, it actually happened. I mean, it was something I either read about or I was there when it happened. And I did go to a steak and seafood bar one night on a journey and find there was a wedding going on in the steak and seafood bar. So that's where that line came from, because I had noted on tour different things, that I'd seen. They all kind of came together in that song. But as you said, the ending is the twist. It's kind of like not really sour grapes, but it's sort of like talking about really how catastrophic you can make your own life. You don't have to. I mean, listen, it's your life. Your life's your life. You can make it anything you want. You can go as low as you want, or you can go as high as you want. But somewhere in there, the best thing is to find a stable Zen position in the middle where the fluctuations aren't too great that you go out. But in living out their dream, that's what people were doing. They were living out that fantasy dream that's partly been created by social media. The thing, oh, look, I'm doing this. Look, I'm doing that.
It's like
Who
an
would have thought
illusion
we'd
sometimes.
waste our time doing that? But
Yeah.
people do.
What guitars are living out their dream?
Right, that's a bit more 175 oriented
Okay, the
because
classic. Yeah.
that's got a lot of that 175 on it, and that I'm very at home on that, especially when when I do all sorts of things. I can do anything on the 175, but sometimes I'm not going to use that. And on luminosity, there's a kind of a more subtle variety there's a bits of Strat, but there's a lot of steel. But anyway, moving forwards, living out the dream, quite a lot of that 175. And then we come on to Mirror to the Sky. It opens with the Fender Telecaster.
Right. Yeah, the big
Which one
epic.
we layer, darling, darling, darling. And I play that really all the way through, besides various other guitars like classical guitar, some other stuff. I play a lot of 12-string acoustics in the middle with harmonics and things that are going on in a kind of unusual segment we
Oh, it's
have.
really, really beautiful. Can you
So
elaborate on the line "Dreams of a Sky Without Fire"? What's
well,
that
what that
about and for?
was that was a song I'd written some time back, and it was actually a whole song. That wasn't the song you're hearing. That was like the chorus. And one day I just realised that the rest of the song was so strange and stopped and start, and it was so kind of highly personal. And yet the line, "A Sky Without Fire" wasn't. It kind of haunted me. So I suggested to John that I scrap the song. And here's the only bit I want to sing, which is, "Dreams of a Sky Without Fire." So he said, "No, that's great. Let's just have that." So the song went out the window, but the chorus stayed. And then John eventually wrote the Mirror to the Sky kind of central song, which has his own, acoustic guitar. And I do single line Telecaster in that. And that arrangement has taken, it's a very complicated arrangement, go to a lot of different places in that. And that's what I think keeps us interesting. But very early on, I'd said that we'd taken a bit of MIDI from the recording of a line from acoustic guitar, and we got the MIDI so we could demo an orchestra. And this is when I said to the guys, this could be orchestral, because instead of me just going da 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 da, they're going to play that da 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 da. It's going to be harmonized and all this. So we got the demo from Paul K. Joyce, who is our arranger for orchestral stuff, and everybody loved it. I thought it was great. So that's where again, like the Quest, we added orchestra, except mainly most of the orchestra is on Mirror to the Sky. That's really where we gave it all the space. Like on the first one we did together like this was the Quest, and Dare to Know was once again the first time we presented the orchestra in a big way and gave them their own space, which we do on Mirror to the Sky. But Mirror's really good fun because when you think this must be all over, haven't they done this yet? And then we come hurtling in after the orchestra get their 16 bars or 24 bars. where they elaborate on all the beautiful things, make the themes very beautiful in orchestral sense. And then we come back and say, no, it's not over. We're rocking out. And we kind of rock out with a version of an earlier instrumental section that you don't hear any of the old first parts, you hear new parts. Once again, Telecaster is double tracked and kind of really getting in your face. And then the orchestra, through Paul's arrangement, instead of it being like a drone, there was an awful lot of droning going on in that first instrumental break. You know, it was, but we had these kind of lines. But this time, you know, we've developed the opening line. We made that a minor line, and that's what I play. And we double track Tellys, and then he introduced some chords that I didn't write anywhere. So the arrangement went hovering into these different chords. You know, we were in D, then we were in B flat, and then hang on, there's an A flat major 7 song. So basically, I twiddle around on that and found some interesting ways of using that arrangement. But it's still not over, because we end, and you think surely, and then the orchestra say, no, we just got one more thing to say. And they come back again, just for about 8 bars, and it's the wonderful thing. So Mirror was an experiment, you know, a highly experimental track, probably the most experimental track we did, and you know, it says a lot about the way that, yes, bigger pieces can be developed, and it's another example, I guess, of that.
Yeah, another Yes epic, and it's always nice to have one of those.
Yeah.
And I was kind of wondering when this lineup was going to get around to one of those, but I think you said in another interview that, you know, epics don't just magically happen; they kind of have to need to happen, or
They kind of
present themselves as such.
Yeah, they have to present themselves a little bit, you know, as a temptation to find out where you can take.
Because it's easy to string 10 things together, but it has to flow logically, or there's no point, you know.
A lot of that is hard work, and I did a fair bit of that, trying out arrangement stuff, because Curtis Schwartz and he's the engineer who's very much behind this record, and he's been a collaborator of mine for 25 years. So basically, we've not yet tired of driving each other mad to get to somewhere we want, you know. And basically, we would try out arrangements, and if we're convinced, then we'll let everybody know, you know, we've made an arrangement adjustment, and do this accordingly. And so we could jump right on to Circles of Time, because here's another totally different story where we're starting the album with the remainder of the tracks from the Quest. As I said, we had 2 10-minute tracks. One of them was Mirror, and the other one was Luminosity. And John and I are sharing some material, and he said, "Oh, I've got this song. What do you think?" And I went, "Please, let's have this on the album. Don't put it anywhere else. This has to be on the album." So I knew then we had our, if you like, our real, I wouldn't call it a ballad, but our real turn down track, you know, the track that is really mellow, and it never uses the full power of the band. It relies on the like Wonder Stories did, you know, like a lot of songs we've done. You know, there's tracks where we're not so much a rock band, we're more of a acoustic, and here it is again. So John had a lovely acoustic work on his, you know, his acoustic guitar, strumming the chords with the inversions that he wrote around the song. And then it was very interesting, because we did try a lot of things on it, and it got weighed down with, you know, church organs and all sorts of stuff, but in the end we all had to get it all off and just find the most minimal. Paul K. Joyce had written a very minimal string arrangement, and we used some of that, and everything was very minimal. Billy does sing on it once, you know, but that's the only time it really kind of worked. So, and I played very little on it. It was fun playing. It's, in particular, they're interested that it's a nice combination. It's one guitar, but it's recorded in 2 ways. It's the front pickup of a 175. But it's also the acoustic sound of the 175 at the same time, because after all, it's a full body guitar. It has some acoustic quality.
Sure.
So he puts those together in a sort of 50-50 degree. Acoustic mic on the front, and the the DI guitar going to an amp. So basically, that's a very subtle sound, because it's actually multidimensional. But again, there wasn't much to do. John was brilliant at doing that, and we had future memories on the Quest, which was a similar story. Didn't need a lot doing to it. But what I did do, so we're dabbling with Circles of Time, and we're still thinking, well, we don't want that. don't like this. And I came back to my own studio and I thought, well, the one thing that never interferes with a chord structure but enhances it is a pedal steel. Because unlike the steel I'm usually seeing, like the Fender, that's got no pedals. It can't play chord movements, with inversions.
Right.
Interesting. It's hard work doing chordal work on it because it's just what a chord,
Right.
But with the pedal, I can add the suspensions and the ninths and the sixths and all that kind of stuff while I'm changing chord. So in there, not a lot happens, but when John comes in, circles of time, you've got the pedal steel just about kind of just not interfering, but giving that lovely texture that's supposed to be in country music.
Sure.
But I've, since To Be Over, which is really the first place I played pedal steel guitar, and a very proud moment that was, because all the bit in the middle, that took some working out. And it's a marvelous instrument. I admire people who play that for a living because,
Yeah.
Jesus, it's demanding, feet, footwork and knee work and pedal work and string work. There's a lot to it. It's a
You had
complicated.
that on the Relayer tour, if I remember. I remember seeing the footage. That was like
That's
the
right.
1 year you took it on the road.
Yeah, what I did that to was quite exceptional. I think I had the steel there all night, and it was the Showbird, and it had a Fender in front of it. I mean, that was a colossal manifestation of steel guitars.
Sure.
Uh, so I've done it in the fairly different way. Another time I did, when we did, here's an interesting thing, when we did Going for the One as an album series, I'm sure I went back and had a separate position for the pedal steel. So I went back there and had my stool and my pedals and all that. So there's a few ways of doing it, or don't even try and comp it on another way. Anyway, let's get back to the plot. Do you want
Yeah.
to do another song?
Oh,
Because
yeah. I guess we
we
have
go
the
into
bonus
bonus.
tracks, which I think
Yeah.
sit really nicely with the album as a whole. They don't feel tacked on.
No, they were worked on in the same intensity as the whole album. We didn't know which tracks would be assigned to the bonus disc because we never conceived of a bonus disc before the Quest. But Thomas had a thing about it, and we kind of played game, if you like, played the ball. So
Right.
basically, here we've got Unknown Place, which is a pretty big song as well. That has, similarly to Living Out the Dream, it has a part where you get to it. It could have been over, but we found another development that we could bring into play to make the song have a kind of two-part ends. But there's an awful lot of great organ on this one, organ soloing and guitar soloing interchanged in two different ways. One is a more of a rock style, it's a kind of like almost jazzy vibe, but in the end it's more like left to Jeff to be like the church organ in this other domain,
Yeah,
which
it
headings
reminded me
more.
like a touch of Awaken, the middle of Awaken kind of dropped
Yeah,
in
there
there.
is that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and an Unknown Place, that we wanted something mystifying about it as well. So some of it is quite straightforward, but it's also got a shock beginning, with the acoustic guitar making you think, oh, I see. And then suddenly, you get some voices come in, and then you get the band like coming in, but not to play rhythm, but to play a riff, So I think it's a nice mix of arrangement. So arrangement is what I think, yes, listeners don't realize they want, but they want, you know what I mean? They want arrangement, that they want things to develop. And that's
Yeah.
what we were
We,
so
we we
good
want to
at.
be surprised. I
Yeah,
don't
we
want to know how it's going to end before it's over. I
we
want
just don't
this
want the
album's
song.
great about that.
Yeah, it's no good if the song just keeps not surprising. It's got
Right. I
to
mean,
have
it's like
things
this
to.
is yes. Yes is
Yeah.
full of surprises.
Yeah. Well, there's on that track. I mean, I list a fair bit of acoustic guitars, a 175, the Les Paul Junior. You see, there's a little batch of guitars, a 175, the Les Paul Junior, Strat, Telecaster. I can
Wow.
do most of my recordings. I've got to have those, because if I'm doing a back part, like say I'm using a Rockman, I do use a Rockman sometimes. I stick a Telecaster in it, I get one sort of thing that I know, or I put Les Paul Junior in it, and I get a fatter, tuggier kind of sound. So there's sort of things that I like to use, but there again, as I said, the opening track was something totally different with an analog pedal board, not something I'd usually do over the recent years. So there's joy in variety. You know what? If you just give me one guitar and one amp, you know, I might get frustrated after a while. I want some gizmos. You
Well,
know.
I liken it to a painter with a box of paints
Hmm,
in different colors,
that's right.
very much.
Well, there's two more songs. There's 1 second is enough, and both these songs are quite kind of sprightly songs. They're not like withdrawn, thoughtful things. They're kind of pushing on songs, and I think that's why they work quite well after Unknown Place, is because they've both got their own little personality. 1 second is enough. You know, it asks the question. You know, happiness. You know, it kind of comes and goes, but we don't know why.
Sure.
It's like, okay, what is that? So basically, I kind of in a light sort of way, you know, describe the sort of the movements, anyway, incredibly vaguely. I will say part of the job of lyrics isn't always to be totally clear on what you're on about, but you have to be on about something underneath it, even if it's not really that apparent. And there certainly is that going on in that song. Well, the album concludes with another title that I think this one kind of was almost going to be called Too Much Near Another Yes song, you know, because on the ladder we had a beautiful song called It'll Be a Good Day, right?
Yeah.
And this song was originally called It's a Good Day to Be Had by All, you know, and I always thought that's a long title. It's a
Yeah.
good day to be had by, and I thought, yeah, it's a good day. It's like the other one. So in fact, then I realized the hook of the chorus was really that, you know, is love a magic potion? It could have been love, is love a magic potion, or is love that's what I chose. So is magic, is love the magic potion? And in a way, you know, it harks back to, you know, 1967 when you know I wasn't really ready for flower power, you know, but I evolved through it from being, you know, in the in crowd into being Tomorrow, which was an official psychedelic band, which I've got a new album
Yeah.
released,
I was
remodeling
I was about
of
to
that
bring that
whole
up. Before we
yeah,
move on, though, I do want to
yeah.
ask you, how did you come up with the bass line for Magic Potion?
Right, but
It's
yeah,
great.
that's one
So
of the ones I
catchy.
said, Billy, I do want you to play this. This is a bass line that really is the song. You know, I mean, it's got a lot to do with the song, and it's intricate, but the way you've got to have it balanced is that it's not actually in your face going. Dun, 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 dun. But I like the way in the second verses section we had Jeff playing the line as well, so we kind of emphasize the part. But yeah, that's the tricky little bass line. I realized that, well, this comes from the fact that most of my music is compiled from small ideas I have. So, you know, I get this idea like a couple of chords or a riff or maybe a melody. And basically, it's gluing them together, which is mostly part of the great fun of making music,
Sure.
isn't all this stuff and recording it and mastering it and mixing it. And really, it is. That's all beautiful. But a very secretive, beautiful part is when you're creating it. So I come up with that. I think, yeah, behind this song, da, 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 da. So it's kind of easy on the ear, but how about if I took that riff and tried it behind it? So, yeah, I mean, it's not totally in character, but any kind of Busy Yes bass riff is in character. You know what I mean? By it
Oh,
being
yeah.
yes, understood. It's almost got a little bit of disco in it somewhere, or maybe it's a
Well,
bit 80s Trevor
well,
Horn.
it's interesting how it changes the whole vibe when you get to the verse. It's almost kind of 70s jazzy, kind of,
Yeah,
you know,
almost. What
almost
was
like
that band
Steely
called?
Dan or something.
Yeah, and our version, you know, with the great bass player. What was his name? It's suddenly. No, I can't think of it. But there were a lot of great players who could add a riff to something that really pepped it. I mean, think about, you know, Two Tribes. You know, that's a great
Sure.
bass riff that's Trevor wrote, I suppose, or the band wrote, and
Yeah.
various people played, including me, tried to play it and to convince Trevor that we could play that riff or he could use that recording of it. And he told me that it's a conglomerate of various performances, actually,
Okay.
different players. But anyway, bass riffs are really, you know, I took a track I'm working on and I decided I need to rethink it and what was wrong with this track. And what was wrong with it was that I'd originally conceived it as like a full-time track. But the more I sung it and put it and played it and things, it needed this You know, it needed to be halftime. So I took the bass off and put a new bass on, which was halftime. And I've actually got to do nothing else. Just by changing the bass to halftime, it's given the whole mood of the track the thing I was looking for. You know, relaxed bass is just confidently moving, as opposed to, you know, giving you the beats in your face, because the mood had changed. And I think that happens on Yes quite a lot when Billy designs places that are much vaguer bass wise. You know, I just plotted a bass doing the roots, you know, and that isn't enough for Billy quite often. And there are only about 3 times in the whole album when I requested just simple straight ahead roots, you know, Billy, because sometimes he can marvelously not over complex, but he can bring complexity to something quite simple.
Sure.
And that's always worth reviewing, but it's not an all the time thing you want, you know, just like you don't want a guitar ranting in your face, always trying to get your attention. It's the same with the bass, but we certainly make sure that the bass is as integral a part of the sound as everything else.
Well, excellent. Well, it's out in about 2 weeks, folks. So definitely pick up a copy. If you haven't already pre-ordered, this would be a good time to do it. Yes, Mirror to the Sky. Excellent. How much more time do we have? I
don't mind. We can go on for 10 minutes.
Okay, I've got a few more questions. Some are just kind of random, and other ones are related to the new Tomorrow album.
Yeah.
Tell me, this was the group that you were in prior to Yes. This is a quintessential psychedelic British group, and I think the Tomorrow album really hangs quite well with the best of the lot, if not better than a lot of them. And I was curious, was it like you had the master tapes all these years and you decided to spruce them up with modern technology, just remixing and kind of EQing it, or well, how did that come about?
It was done something by like Giles Martin did with Revolver. He had the luxury of going back to the actual master tapes and doing that. We actually didn't do that at all, partly because we didn't think we could, or if we did, we would get ourselves in deep water. So what we asked for was something that hadn't been available for years, was the mono mixes, the original mono mixes. It took us a year to get those from Warner Brothers, who now own EMI and have the rights. So they kindly we did a worldwide distribution deal with them, providing we got the mono tapes. So what we did, we got the mono tapes, and we'd found, this is Curtis again, Curtis Schwartz and I, we'd found a lot of, which I don't really like to call them tricks, because they're far more interesting than tricks. But there's technology out there now, and it's called RX10. It is now RX10, and the company is called not Octopus, but it begins with that. Always gets me at it. Anyway, so what this can do, it can take a single track, and you can decide what you can take out of that, and then put back into it at an adjusted level, or an adjusted pitch, or an adjusted timing. So in fact, what you can do is, so yeah, I mean, look, this is the trick. Where it was most emphasized and most rewarding was on the song Revolver, which had breaks in the music where the tempo didn't match, and they put reverb to make you think it was almost in time. So there was a lot of mismatching of tempos and speeds. So not only could we go into the mono mixes, this is because there's a guitar, a voice, bass, and a drums. Now those 4 things, RX9 or RX10, they can separate, they can take them out to degrees. I mean, as long as you're always putting it back in the mix. If you wanted to take something out altogether, you might find it's on other tracks, and therefore you can't. But for the most part, we could achieve everything we wanted to. So I did a list, a whole 1-page list that listed all the songs we'd accumulated in anticipation, that we'd requested the mono mixes of, and we could then fix stuff that was unthinkable to fix even 5 years ago, even certainly 55 years ago. There was no way to make the album better. So I took 3 tracks off that I think were inferior stylistically, and they were good songs, but they weren't our style of songs. It wasn't a band psyching out the Flower Power. So basically I found other tracks that were hidden, and some studio releases that hadn't been put together. So basically, I put together all the best of that music that we could find, and treated it with the RX10 situation, which is an amazing technology. So it means that, for instance, we can take a vocal off, and we can decide in which way we might be able to. Well, the vocals are. I won't mention the vocals. Let's take the guitar. I've got a guitar. It's a bit too loud. It comes in and splats you, and you think, oh, that spoils it. We can take that back. And if the bass is a little bit out of pitch or out of time, we can adjust that. But what we weren't doing was actually physically remixing it. We didn't have faders
Right.
and stuff. We had little ways of altering stuff as it went along. And the way, we did that a lot. I mean, although it was planned to do in a day, it took a day fundamentally to map through all the songs and find out how many of the problems we could fix in one day. But it took several other days to actually create all the level of perfectionism we'd hoped to do. So it's not remixed, it's reimagined, and by me, and also remastered in the sense that it's had some treatment and reordering, and it doesn't really hurt. But it's got, a lovely sleeve, and, we've given it a sort of ability, and it's now called Permanent Dream. So that separates it from the original album, which was just called Tomorrow. And so I rethought the order and got a chance to have 2 or 3 quite wild guitar improvisations, but not together. The timing of them is crucial. I think you get Y first after about 5 tracks, then you get another one further on.
I love Why. I think that might be my favorite track. Can you tell me a little bit about that one?
Well, we love the Birds. Their vocal sound and Roger McGuinn's 8 Miles High. That was really very, very inventive, very, very inventive group. And yes, they had a long history, and of course they ended up with the Sweethearts of the Rodeo, which is a great Birds album. It's different from the earlier the notorious Birds brothers, but in the earlier era, of course, they were juggling with psychedelic music, and we love. I don't know what it was about White. Well, it was partly that Jim McGuinn, he started that da 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 ding da 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 ding, which I play again, but I take that to another extreme maybe, and treat that as a basis to jump off for a fairly big improvisation. And those were something we hardly ever talked about. We just did it.
Yeah.
We got to a point in the song, and I could rattle around for as long or for short as I liked. And if it was happening, it was long, and if it wasn't happening, it was short.
Sure. Well, every night's different, and it
Yeah,
just depends on the mood and where it takes you.
yeah.
I had heard you mention in another interview that you opened for a number of seminal acts back in the day, including the Who. Can you share any memories of? You said you guys were almost kind of scared of them, that they were kind of just this wild, untamed bunch.
Well, there's a few things that happened in Red Hill. Now, Red Hill is a town between London and Brighton, and it's in the middle there. And it was almost like a no man's land, as far as if you were London and you went there, you thought, well, this could be trouble. Bikers, rockers, mods. There was an aggressive place. Now, I don't know. I think I've got the 2 visits to Red Hill that they almost got a similarity. One was when we opened for the Who. And all we remember was that I think we saw Pete going up the road past our van in a Rolls Royce or something. We were on our way, and there was Pete kind of thing. So we knew this band were like, they were big time. They had the dosh, they had the hits. They were the Who. So I guess we were a bit on our toes. We weren't that comfortable. And after the show, I think they did a fair bit of trashing up. I think Keith came off at Red Hill and battered the dressing room considerably. But let me say about another time we played there, which was that we were scared shitless because we were going to get beaten up by a bunch of these guys. And we hid in the van after the show. We heard these guys looking for us. We actually hid in the van. But the 60s were very unpredictable. This was pre-Flower Power, when the place was supposed to, be filled with the hearts of loving people. But before that, it was like, they didn't see. We were a bit of a mod group before the Tomorrow became Tomorrow. We were the Inca, and we were kind of mods. And it's like, we love you afterwards. I mean, it's ridiculous talking about this now because it's so out of sync, with the world I know. But maybe in another level, it depicts the sort of unnecessary violence that keeps going on around the world, irrespective of how many live aids we have or how many hunger cries we have or how many urgent problems the world's got. They just never seem to be substantially repaired,
No,
fixed,
people are
invested, solved, healed. That's what the world needs, is massive healing. And boy, it's not there yet.
well, great music helps get
It
us a
does.
little closer to that goal, I
Going.
think.
Definitely keeps me and you and us going.
Another quick question for you. The Les Paul, the one you used during the Tormato era. I
Yeah.
saw a video recently. I guess you had let it go at one time, and somebody
Yeah.
else owns it. What inspired you to let it go?
Well, really, one key thing was that I couldn't play it. It was so heavy.
Oh, I
It was,
bet.
and at that time, I was very sensitive because I hadn't realized that when I go running about the stage and going, like crackers, of course, there's a price to pay for that. So
Sure.
the heavier the guitar, the worse it was. I remember Dave Stewart once calling me up and saying, "What's the lightest guitar you can play? Because I've hurt my back and I got a show and I don't know what to play." And I said, Telecaster, with no additions. The Telecaster, but like the Les Paul, yeah, what a sound that guitar had. If only I could have seen the value of keeping it, but that's the same any guitar you part with. There's always one idea why you might have kept it.
Right.
But in a way, yeah, I wanted a more practical, and I've got one. It's the Les Paul Roland that I
The
use.
red one you have,
The
right?
red one. That
Yeah.
guitar's beautiful. And partly beautiful because I played it a lot and I played it on stage many, many tours. Done a lot of recording. In fact, the opening to the Ice Bridge is played on that guitar. So it really is a great Les Paul for me. So having a gorgeous, very, very decorative but really the weight, it was really, if you ever see one and get the chance, lift it up and you'll go, I think I know
Right.
what
And
Steve, it could have been made with rock
right.
for
And a
all I
regular
know,
less
not
is
wood.
probably 12 pounds anyway. That's one of the lighter ones, So this
Yeah,
probably is like 15 or something. It's really beautiful, though. I mean, there were very few of those made. Did Gibson approach you when it was new and say, "Hey, Steve, would you like this?" Or
I did go to Gibson a lot, in Kalamazoo. They used to book shows in Kalamazoo, particularly because they knew I was going to say, "Why aren't we going to Kalamazoo?" So in the 70s, yeah, it came up. It was a model that fascinated me when I heard about it. That it was all wood. The scratch board, the knobs, everything was
yeah,
wood, which had a weight effect, and also it had. One of the things I didn't realize was those machine heads I had on it, which were like super Grovers. They were actually square,
mhm,
the giant things. I mean, they weigh an absolute ton. I mean, I take them off guitars now
right.
because I don't want the neck going down like that.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
yeah, as lovely as all the guitars I've owned, they've all been exciting when I bought them. You know what I mean? I didn't buy guitars that I wasn't excited about. But if I had it 30 years and I hadn't used it a lot, I'd start to ask the question, well, that's not really doing much for me. But that guitar did, and it was highly featured on Going for the One. And it was a truly great guitar. It may even been on Machine Messiah
yeah. I
as
think it
well.
is, and a lot of Tormato as well. Yeah, kind
Yeah,
of.
but now I've got the ES Artist, which was my original Asia live guitar, but
Yeah,
that developed, and that's on Mirror to the Sky quite a bit on the album because that got renovated by Tim Stark at Manson Guitars. Basically, when it came back, it was just singing. The whole guitar had been set up right. We got rid of an issue we had with some deteriorating gold that kept going green, lo and behold.
uh,
And it was the case. So basically, we got the guitar going, and I've been recording on it a great deal. And many of the tracks we've talked about have moments, like particularly Magic Potion and well, one second is enough. Features the Steinberger 12 string, I should have
okay.
said,
Yeah,
because that's a very call upable sound that I make. It's on a lot of new age records I did in the late 90s, 2000, where it's a clean, very sprightly sound. And I thought that was a good move, doing a different sound. And also it starts with an organ introduction, because I said, I'm not going to open every song on the album. Come on, you got to play this. So, we find ways of getting the balance, but certainly with guitar textures, that's one thing that pleases me about albums I make, when I can hear going through the different textural things. And I enjoy that rightness about the sound.
yeah. Here's another question, totally unrelated.
Yeah.
I noticed Jeff hasn't contributed a whole lot to these three Yes albums compared to some of the other writers in the band. Is that a conscious decision, or is there a fear that it may sound like Asia if he writes too much? Or
Well, you've touched on a few points, but no, it's really about what people have got. And when we did the quest, Jeff was quite forthcoming, had quite a lot of things. In the most part, you know, he had the tracks, the Ice Bridge, and also the basic shape. I mean, it was a big shape, but it changed
right,
of you know, a living dream. What's it called?
Living Island?
A living island.
Yeah.
So basically, you know, he had his foot in the door pretty big that time, but this time there wasn't so much.
Okay.
And you know, I worked out some things on living out their dream that were using some of Jeff's theme, a tune that he had that I used for the verses was actually written by Jeff, the tune. So basically, it's what you've got, you know, what's available. We didn't pressurize him and say, why haven't you got anything? We just
Right.
kind of kept accumulating our stuff and waiting to see what we could do with Jeff. So maybe on the next album, you know, he'll be more forthcoming. There's no really pattern behind it, and you know, I don't know what one should expect. You know, I mean, I don't think one should expect, but it's nice that have found a level of balance as good as we have it at the moment of the main songwriters. But
Sure.
if Jeff comes through more on the next album, that'll be great.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we always enjoy hearing his writing, but
Yeah.
we enjoy yours just as much. So, I understand it's not like the album has to be divvied up evenly between
No,
everyone in the band when it comes to writing.
one can't really create that.
Yeah. Is there any activity coming from the Steve Howe trio? I understand you're working on a new album. Is there
No,
any truth to
no,
that?
no. No, I
No?
mean, Bill and I have been collaborating, you know, on mostly my records and those three trio albums since 1993. So he's a big part of my output outside of the band. And after we did the album, Direction, New Direction, was that what it was called? New Frontiers. Yeah, it was called New Frontiers. So basically, no, that was it. I mean, really, Ross moved away musically from us and got on with some great work that he wants to do. And similarly, Dylan dabbled with things, and then he was working with Wilco Johnson for many years before he passed away. So basically, Dylan and I, you know, we don't really see that. It was great that we took the opportunity to do as much work as we did, and to do those three albums was considerable commitment to it, and the tours we did. And also in Canada, we did some nice touring and a little in Europe, but most of it was done in the UK. So we love that band, but you know, like I said about the reality of a band, it has to be real, and we lost that with the trio, partly because Ross was off and I was off. One time, I was so busy that I could hardly get into doing solo albums and outside projects. But in that 2012, I left the reunion of Asia because that was evident to me that I couldn't keep up being in two bands and the trio and my solo output. So something had to give, and I guess the trios had to give in that way. There was some interesting filming, a little bit's on the internet, of a show we did in I think it might have been Southport or somewhere like that. So maybe there's a reassessment of that band should be done. In fact, there's an alternative mix of the whole album of the last one that was quite a different mixing style. So maybe there's a little to show of how the band has evolved through maybe a collection or something, a club.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for clarifying that. Can you talk a little bit about the difficulties Yes has had lately with touring? I know the European dates were kind of pushed back.
Well, not really, because you know, in some ways things are beyond my control. You know, like they're beyond everybody's control at times. And basically, you know, to dissect why would be like asking a very big question, because you know, there's never one single reason. But certainly the one that's been cited publicly more is the insurance problem. But I don't see that that's going to change next year. But there is confidence. When you've got confidence, then you can move forward a lot better. And when you look at Europe at the moment, with that just awful business with Russia and Ukraine,
Yeah.
it's so tragic. But that's if that wasn't bad enough, you've got all the other outbursts of demonstrations in France and trouble. I mean, fortunately, Italy's been quite quiet recently, but then you get the earthquakes, in Turkey and things. So we were going to be touring a lot of places that were bordering closer to a lot of the great troubles, not only violence, but also geographical, natural risks.
Yeah.
So in a way, there was a lot of reasons why, and we've kind of just stalled that idea, booked ourselves another European tour for next year, and but mainly is a little bit more Western Europe and the UK, and we're really excited to do that because we've got the Albert Hall to finish it off.
Oh,
But in the
nice.
meantime, of course, we haven't announced it yet. I don't think, but we are going to be venturing into the States this year,
Yeah, I
and
heard there's going to be
yeah.
at least one leg. I hope maybe more. I'd love to see you down here in Atlanta again. It's been a little while.
Well, we'll try and cover the terrain. This was what we usually do. But last tour we did a east-west-east tour, and that demands a lot of traveling. So this time we're doing an east-west tour. So hopefully we can take in, the bits of Florida and the bits of everywhere else that's on, make places en route because we've got great demand. We've had great offers to play, so we'll be selecting what we can actually do in a given time frame, which isn't as many as people might like us to do, but we are very realistic. You see, we don't take on things that are going to be, because after 6 weeks of touring or 7 weekends, things start happen in a band. You start to want it to stop.
Bit of cabin fever in the
Yeah, I mean, yeah, cabin fever,
yeah,
and also repetition, and also kind of a hunger for just to settle down somewhere.
sure. Oh, I
So
totally
of
agree.
course we are big tourers. None of us dislike touring in any way at all, but only because the show is worth doing. So the rest of it is grappling with greater difficulties. There's leaving to go to Japan and going to Japan was as difficult as going to America. I was taken to second immigration, and all because my visa was there, but it wasn't printed in my passport. It was on the computer so I mean, I had all sorts of problems. But I can only say that traveling and accommodating movement does get harder the more you've done. But I usually just resign myself to it. I say, okay, I know how long this is going to be. I know some of the stuff that's going to come at me doing that. So just get your head down and get on with it, and find the pleasure in the show as much as you can. That's the real reward, the pleasure in the show.
What do you do with your downtime on the road? Do you have any special hobbies or activities?
Well, it's about travel, usually making the travel work. If we happen to be in somewhere for a while, I mean, I'll dabble in things, whether it's something to do with the First Nation American. If there's a nice museum in Denver or something, or down in Phoenix, I'll go. And then other places I go to guitar shop like Cincinnati. Cincinnati's got quite a lot to offer in guitar shops, Gary's Guitars, and also some great clothes shops I found opposite the hotel. So, so veggie restaurants, but it's not really about being a tourist at any point at all. I've been there, seen it, done it, bought the program and the T-shirt, and I'm back.
Right.
So there's a sense of accommodation and having my own space. I guess the most important thing is, I usually travel by car and I have my own space, and that's what keeps me sane. I'm not sure I could go any other way. And the guys have seen that sometimes I'm even there before them when they've taken 2 flights. So basically, there are ways of accommodating it, but it takes immense patience, and it's a sacrifice. It's always been a sacrifice. Most probably people don't realize how much of a sacrifice, but
Sure.
we did that because the art calls us. If it wasn't calling, I wouldn't be there. So it's calling, and I've always followed my music, my musical. I don't know, just I follow my music. That's as simple as it.
Do you think you're going to work in some tracks from the new album into the live set?
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we know
Excellent.
how to do that.
I hope you can play the title track. That would be pretty compelling.
Well, we haven't decided, but we're allotting time for that.
You know,
And
that's a long one, yeah.
yeah, but we know we're not going to be playing Relay, although we've advertised that for 3 or 4 years. That's partly why we're not going to be playing it. We're just like we're kind of overcooked on that idea. Mentally, we kept getting ready, and so now we feel like we've got a new plateau to be on. Hey, we can do what the hell we like. Let's do something really great. And of course, having some new music would invigorate us as well. And picking the tunes we really do want to play from the past is also nothing but pleasure. So
Was
roll on.
there ever a time when you all got together and played side two of Relayer live, thinking you were going to play it out soon?
Now, only in the 70s did we do that, and when we
Okay.
were playing side two,
Hmm.
yeah. After that, both those songs were absolutely hushed, except for me doing a solo acoustic guitar version of To Be Over, just to kind of keep my finger in it a bit.
Right.
But that's those recordings are yeah, they're very bold, Well, Sound Chasers very bold,
Oh
and
yeah.
then to be honest, got some of the sort of like relaxedness that yes, we're finding in its maturity.
Yeah, a very sublime track, and that's kind of,
Yeah,
different sides of the Yes equation, and the perfect album kind of has all these things,
yeah.
the rocking things and the kind of beautiful, sublime, textural things.
We hope so. Yeah, that they are the ingredients we need.
Yeah, and this new one's got
Um,
that going on too. So,
good.
just one
Good.
more quick question before we go. We're missing Alan a lot, and I was wondering if you could just share a random Alan story that makes you smile all these years later that maybe nobody's heard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to spot a couple, of course, in the 70s, we were actually partners in a health food shop in Hampstead in London for a while. It turned out to be a bit of a money drain because it wasn't really making money. So we had another experience. Besides being in Yes together, we were also owners of a health store. So that was quite good fun. But then he knocked us sideways, really, when we got to drama and Trevor and Jeff joined and we did the drama album. I mean, really, his drumming there was some of the most incredible stuff he'd done to date.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the best recordings too. It just is captured so beautifully on that record.
That had such a. Funny enough, I went off and did all the guitars myself on my own, and went back, and everybody said, "God, these are bright," and I went, "Well." It's a guitar.
Right.
Yeah, it's right. And then we got the keyboards and we did that album and the teamwork between Hugh Padgham, Trevor Horn, the band, myself wanting to say what things could be like, and we came up with that because Eddie did an interim period. He did the first 3 weeks or the first 2 weeks when we were doing the backing tracks. But unfortunately, the relationship didn't manifest into being a solid, way of going forward. So from then on, we took it on ourselves. And Trevor wasn't like, I'm the producer. He never did that once. He stayed exactly as he was. We all did. We just all collaborated on the arrangements and the production and the mixing, So we had some great people, mixing drama with us, Gary Langham and Julian Mendelsohn, and all these guys were in the studio. So it was a very interesting period. But of course, then Alan just became the lifelong drummer, lifelong Yes drummer, right the way through when I wasn't there in the 80s, and then Union, and then from Keys to Ascension when I did rejoin and stay. So basically, he was ploughing on, and I knew he'd never give up. I mean, this guy was not going to say, actually, I'm not coming. that was it. He'd come by hook or by crook, whatever he could do, and his commitment to Yes was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. So
There's a,
we love his memory, and we dedicate Mirror to him.
oh,
Being
excellent. A great idea. There's a picture floating around on the internet of the two of you back in the 70s in Las Vegas. Have you seen that recently in front of like the Golden Nugget or something?
Is it like two figures behind the Golden Nugget sign or
Yeah,
something?
yeah, like the two of you just out in the street. I'm guessing you guys probably played there in 77 and just went downtown to look around a bit and
We were more curious then because Las Vegas had that unusual thing. I guess we didn't go to the West Coast till 72. So we had a year or so when we wondered, what's the West Coast like? Of course, we got there and sort of fell in love with it, as you can't help but do at first. And then then it became like obvious this was a sort of party town. Well, LA particularly was your
Right.
party town, and so yeah. Sorry, what was your question again?
Oh, I was just curious if you had any memories of that first trek. I think
Yeah.
Billy saw you guys at like the Sahara or one of those places and like going for the one tour, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, definitely, but we never. We I tell you what was different about it, and why when you say, can you remember the Vegas shows? It was like at first, no, I don't remember the early casinos, but we did play them. But also we played the halls in the town, the real town,
Hmm.
and that was good. That was always good. At first, when we went into casinos, it was a bit like it's a bit kind of icy cold out there. It's like the
Yeah.
air conditioning is,
Oh
and
yeah.
kind of like it's a bit aware, but we got used to that. We got used to being able to pull off shows in casinos because it's a captive audience, and some of them wanted to come and see you, and some of them didn't have anything better to do, so they came and saw you. But at least you had the opportunity to turn them on, and yeah, I mean they were pretty good shows. I tell you what, we started to like was the quality of the facilities. I mean, this is another side of it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I mean, you play an old theatre like the Beacon in Philadelphia or something, no, the Beacon's in New York, whatever it is. You play these old theatres, and sometimes you've got to crawl up 3 pairs of stairs to a dressing room that hasn't been renovated for 50 years,
Right.
But then you go in a casino, and it's like, as I said, too much air conditioning. Sometimes if you got a good dressing room, it was like a suite. You had a bathroom, an annex, a dressing room. You had I mean, why? I'm only here tonight and I'm out of here. I used to say, why stay in the hotel? Why not just stay here? I mean,
Sure.
the
Right.
dressing room's
Exactly.
fine.
Right.
So there are things to appreciate, and you must never forget when you're lucky,
Yeah.
that you sort of appreciate it then, because the next gig, I mean, we did some Asia when the reunion, we did some casinos up in northern Michigan, which were like, we'd call them kind of kitsch or off the wall. They were casinos, a little bit small, a little bit kind of crampy, a little bit nerdy, in the sense that the clientele wasn't your Vegas clientele or even your Reno, and now we're starting to
Oh no.
head down the chart of the kind of folk that like to go to a casino.
Well,
And
sometimes I just see these little old ladies sitting on a stool hucking dollar coin after dollar, and I just think, how did you wind up? How did your life lead you here?
well, especially if it's 8 in the morning and you've come down from
Right.
breakfast and they're still there.
She's
It's like,
working
what
at
happens to these poor people?
a
But
lot.
it's a vice. I mean, they keep trying to find reasons why we should call alcoholism and gambling a sort of like a disease, or it's something you fall into. It's a trap, and if you fall into it, you sink.
Yeah, yeah. Well, or you go broke really quick. I imagine most of those people lost more than they won, but they keep
Yeah,
trying. So maybe there's something to that stick-to-itiveness to
that's right.
inspire us all.
Determination.
Yeah. So, last question. I was curious. Anything left in the archives? A lot of groups say King Crimson. He's released every utterance that the band ever recorded in these lavish box sets. And I just think it'd be cool if Yes could just release one good live show of every tour in the 70s. Do you think there's even enough stuff around to make that happen?
Well, Progeny was a version of that.
Yeah, that kind of
It's,
whet my appetite. It's like now I want Relayer. Now I want Going for the One.
yeah. Well, believe me, Warner Brothers are very interested in that kind of an idea. I thought I had one for them once when I had 6 DAT tapes. Those little DAT tapes, six concerts from Union on 6 DATs, and I said, "Well, look, there's 6 from Union," but that didn't run, and I think that in other words, while you're thinking about going forwards, you can only exert so much time to going back and looking,
Right.
like I did with Tomorrow. I exerted some time there. I said, this is a mess. This could be better, and I got it done. But when you get into the era of Yes, yeah, I mean, if we find some stuff, I wouldn't necessarily have to oversee. I mean, I could approve the mixing, but as far as all live stuff, you see, Yes Songs was totally unique. We mixed that like it was a studio album. We spent months on it, and then after that, we really never did that again. Although Chris mixed Yes shows with Eddie down in the studio, that was done quicker too, much quicker. And then I wash my hands with mixing live, and we just need to find people who are good at mixing live sound, because it's much too much work. If you get a good engineer that they can pull that together,
Yeah.
provided they know the music to someone.
Yeah.
So live music is a is an endless source of another version. Providing, I mean, there's all sorts of tapes that Yes did lose. There was some Philadelphia filming where they filmed the show from above and everything, and piecing it together is difficult. But yeah, if there was more found, it would happen. It would come about, and Warner Brothers might even be thinking more about that now than they were before, because there is mileage in, Progeny was a good idea, and as you say, there would be other takers.
Oh, sure. I just want the whole collection. I want the whole
The whole
70s,
nine yards.
all the way up to Drama, all those.
Yeah.
And do you have any idea why Drama Tour was never officially recorded by? I mean, there is no live footage at all except for, the stuff where you lip synced in the studio and did Into the Lens and Tempest Fugit.
Well, on Yes Live, we did a Yes Live box set, didn't we? Because there is
Yeah,
five.
yeah, in a
There is
word, or I can't
go
remember what it
through
was called.
this in a word. No,
Yeah,
go through this, and I thought Fly from Here were both on there, or maybe their private recordings haven't been released, but I thought they were released on Yes Live. It was part of the Rhino projects we were
yeah,
doing. But yeah, why it wasn't? Yeah,
yeah,
that's a lack of insight at the moment. When you well, we were grappling with holding all the drama together. It was, like the title suggests, it was quite dramatic. But basically, none of us had the insight to think, beyond that. So why don't we capture this so that we can see this later? There was just none of that, as far as I know.
yeah,
It might have been suggested and canned, or it may have been shot with two cameras and canned. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Something could have happened, but the evidence is that really there isn't really anything much that has resurfaced,
yeah.
and I really can't think why, because it was a hell of a tour. It was a hell
Yeah,
of a
yeah, I'd just love to see it. I've seen pictures and it looks really compelling. So who
yeah.
knows, maybe it'll surface someday. I've seen a lot of people pop up with Super
Mm,
8 silent footage
yes,
from Tormato, and then they dub the live track on it and sync
yeah.
it, which must be a monstrous job trying to figure
Yeah,
out
somebody did that with
silent
To Be Over.
footage.
Somebody did that with To Be Over, and they reckon they put that sound there themselves. I don't know how that can be true, because the syncing is fine all the time. And yet, what you'd expect, if it was a different night, that somewhere the syncing just couldn't be the
Yeah, it
same.
couldn't be quite the same. And that,
I don't know how they've done it. They've either done it very meticulously or they didn't.
yeah,
And that guitar's that loud because it was that loud, or the vocals of this, whatever they were. But yeah, I mean, that show that is up there. I mean, I'm not trying to lead people to watch it necessarily, but you can't avoid it. A version of To Be Over is amazing how we managed to play that. I mean, Chris and I are singing virtually all the time with John. There's massive complex harmonies going on, and I'm standing there with these brutal looking steel guitars, two of
yeah.
them, right in front of my face all the time, and somehow I'm still having a lot of fun. And that was our that one. The opening act was Seals and Crofts on that show.
Okay. Summer
We
Breeze.
invited them because we liked Seals and Crofts. We thought they were really cool. So if we were going to have an act, we'd like somebody who was classy, and they were definitely classy.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think it rained, so it didn't turn out to be that classy.
Yeah, yeah. A little soggy.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, is there anything you'd like to share before we wrap it up with our viewers?
I don't know. We've discussed a lot. I
Yeah.
can't think of what I could add. Only that, what have I got on top of my head? No, we're looking forward to getting back and doing live shows, because at the moment we're kind of, got a hiatus really from recording, and we're waiting to let the juices flow naturally, if we do any more work. So with live is very much on our mind. We're working out the set, and there'll be a lot of toing and throwing, and a lot of homework will need to be done, because we don't like to really rehearse together for longer than six or 7 days, just because that in itself gets tiring, and then you've got a tour. So we've got to come well prepared, and that's usually what we do.
When you're prepping and learning a piece of music that you haven't played in decades,
Yeah.
like when you did Masterworks and you relearned Gates, how
Mm.
quickly did that come back to you? I mean, was a lot of it kind of like sometimes your hands remember quicker than your brain does?
I can tell you that much to my delight, even when I think, God, I haven't played this for years. When I get there, if I was part of the writing and the initial recordings, I will find a lot of it. A lot of it will actually come back. I've even said to somebody, I think I can play any Yes song in part that I've ever been part of, because I most probably can. But where the fun gets and where the hard work is in what I call the detail, obviously. So yeah, da, 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 you know parts of the song and they're easy and you can stroll along. But when you get the differences between certain returns, like Gates is particularly a good example. You've got that da, 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 well, there's two of them. And to my ear, I can't even tell which one it is, but when I play it, I have to know which one it is, whether it's the one starting like this or it's the one that actually starts like this. So there's two of those, and that keeps you on your toes a lot. But most of it has got to be memorized. It's got to be in your memory. It's in your DNA memory, because it kind of is. That's what helps me. The break in that is, if I try to play something from Tomato, most probably wouldn't have a chance of knowing what the hell's going on. Partly because it's one of the least played albums, except for Onward. We did Madrigal a little and Don't Kill the Whale sometimes.
Yeah.
But I would say that a lot of the other albums have got tracks that we played loads of times. So, but recalling it is down to having the CD and the handset and your guitar, and you're saying, like, what is this? It's actually just absolute graft. It's absolute graft. You've got to spot notes. Sometimes I can get things. I've got certain versions of Going for the One. I've got a special version of Going for the One where the other band members aren't even there, really.
Right.
It's just the guitar. So I can feature on the guitar. We did those as work tapes, and we used to do that in the early days. But now it's a question of putting it on and hoping that I can hear the guitar well enough to discern what it is. I mean, I had to do that with, like, when we were playing the Ice Bridge, for instance. That guitar part doesn't sound that complicated, but to remember it was very, very difficult, because it was actually quite spasmodic and it returned to certain themes, a bit like a Bach piece does. It returns to certain themes, but not quite the same. So there was a lot to learn and compress into creating memory. And the most important key for that was the vocal. So when the vocal hit something, I'd kind of, okay, well, I think I've got to do this. And the vocal hit something else. It must be that. And that was kind of guiding me. But when you go back to the early intricate 70s, particularly with Relaya, which, as I say, we're not playing at the moment, soon is a separate entity, really, which we love. But those twiddly bits really, yeah. I mean, particularly in the battle scene, when I go, that is a lot of complexity. I love it. I mean, yeah. I wrote stuff. I wrote the guitar part, so I ought to be able to play it. And if I can't, then I'm not sure anybody else could, but I could be the best person to play. But it does recall. There is recall going on. And notes. I make a new chart. Well, not always new, but, I've got charts of how the chords look or what the parts are called. That guides me a lot. I mean, if I've already got a chart, I'm halfway there. But if I've got to make one, then I'm 100% not there yet.
Well, yeah, I'm part of a collective that does a musical tribute show with a different theme each month. And we did one about British bands last summer, and I actually got a group together and we did Don't Kill the Whale, Wondrous Stories, Time and a Word, Astral Traveler.
Wow.
And what other one? What other one was it? I guess Time and the Word was the one. Yeah. So I really enjoyed learning a lot of your licks off of the Tormato track in particular. There's just a lot of those are so unique, and
but they're quite bluesy. I mean, that's quite bluesy. I mean, it happened again on that song on Drum. Oh, my phone's ringing. Okay. I might have to go.
Okay. Yeah, we should probably wrap it up. I don't want to keep you any longer.
Oh yeah. Hi, Steph. Great. Want to chat? Yeah. I'm fine. I'm just going to say goodbye to somebody on Skype. That will take 10 seconds. All right. We're over. We just finished. You called it at the perfect time. Okay. Hold on. All right, then. Lovely to chat.
Yeah. Thanks for everything, Steve. Your music has made my life so much better. Thank you. And I look forward to more. Take care. We'll see.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take it easy. Bye.